Chairman Stephen, fellow accountants, good afternoon. History is a bit boring. I think John has covered a more lighter side of the annual seminars. We talk about being in the ward. Yes, we were there, but we didn't have a cesarean. We had a natural birth. And we are talking about 30 years, but I've not been in the Institute for 30 years. My involvement, active involvement, ended in 2001 when I handed over the presidency to Mr. David Okello. I've kept close, but like a board member, you don't interfere with management. So the other 8 succeeding presidents have continued to manage the Institute, and I am sure that when we actually have the official ceremony of 30 years, they will catch up. Mine is just to share with you what we went through before the Accountant Statute of 1992 was passed by Parliament. And I can take you back, first of all, to before 1972, or if you like, before our independence. We did have a law, but that law was for the whole of East Africa. I don't remember the title. I think it was Registered Accountants of East Africa. It was a colonial law. We became independent in 1962 under Obote I, but it took another 8 years before the government thought of putting in place a national law regulating the accounting profession, and an act called the Registered Accountants Act of 1972. I should call it a bill. Was passed. Unfortunately for Bote, Idi Amin overthrew him before he could sign the law. And so it never became law. Then Idi Amin came until in 1971. Until 1979, the history can tell itself, but they never gave any thought to regulating the accountants. But in any case, by then, the investors who are here, whether it was BAT or Uganda Breweries or whatever, they always had a chief accountant who was an expatriate, who was trained elsewhere. And Asian, without being sectarian, business community, they had the accountants trained in India. And the audit firms were auditing Asian businesses. They were mainly Asian. But of course, we had a few firms, Hunter and Gregg. The name is Hunter and Gregg, but there were some Ugandans there. And that is the situation until 1979, when Idi Amin was overthrown. Then we had a short-lived administration of Yusuf Lule. The opportunity came back to us to establish a national accountancy body. One of the Minister of Finance was the late Sam Savagereka, who happened to be an accountant. And he sent a message to us, look, we can't live without an accountancy body. Can we do something now that I am in the Ministry of Finance and so on? He even suggested that we should call it what? The Institute of Chartered Accountants of Uganda. I happened to be a partner, by then not PwC, it was Coopers and Lybrand. PwC came in 1998 when Pricewaterhouse and Coopers and Lybrand merged. I happened to be a partner and the big man in Coopers and Lybrand, so I had some power and incentive to take the lead. So I quickly invited fellow accountants. By the way, we had tried to do a private association of accountants, but it failed because we had so many people self-styling themselves as accountants who had never even sat an exam, but they were doing business. So they resisted, and we also gave up. So we said the only solution is to what? Is to have an act of parliament. So when the late Sabagareka came out with this idea, we quickly formed an ad hoc committee, and we drafted a possible bill in the name of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Uganda. We all know that in spite of Twagalule or Batufatufe, that administration did not succeed, and it was replaced. The next period from 1979 to 1986, we all remember there was whatever you call them, liberation or rebellion. But there was problem, and nobody was paying attention to regulating accountancy. Until Obote II was overthrown, and then NRM came into power. There was a lot of goodwill for the government. I'm sure there still is a lot of goodwill for the government. And the World Bank and IMF were very keen to put some money into this place. We had an economic reconstruction program and so on, but there was a lack of capacity in various sectors of the country. So the World Bank came up with an institutional capacity building project. I think there were 5 projects. I will not name one of them other than to say that strengthening accountancy was one of the projects. And so we jumped at that opportunity, revived the ad hoc committee, and we decided to draft a bill because it was necessary. I told you our private association could not work. There were more pretenders of accountants out there than the ones who have actually gone through the process of training and passing. So we didn't. So the only solution was to what? To get a law to regulate accountancy. So we did that, and we drafted a bill. Our parent ministry is the Ministry of Finance. I won't go through the whole name. And we presented a bill to them. But I've told you there are very many pretenders who still wanted to be called accountants and to be members of the institute. When the bill went there, we couldn't take it to Parliament. It had to go through the Ministry of Finance. Somebody, actually 2 people, one was a whole prime minister, the other one was a deputy minister of finance. They decided to interfere with the act, and they introduced 4 qualifications into the schedule of those who are eligible to be registered as first members of the institute. John has already mentioned that we didn't have our own members. We had all sat exams elsewhere, but we had sat exams. So we decided that those ones would be the first to be registered as we develop the necessary infrastructure to train and produce our own, get our own examination and let people sit and pass. When the act came, we didn't know they had introduced these other 4 names there, including the one I will mention is chartered secretaries. And we said, you cannot become accountants. They went to court, actually. And eventually, the judge said that you must implement the act as the schedule says. In other words, that we were supposed to put what? Include chartered secretaries and some others as members of the institute. However, there was a clause in the law which set a period for registering the first members of the institute. And these guys were so confident that they would win, which they probably did, a hollow win. They forgot to register. By the time they got the win, the period had expired. So fortunately for us, that killed their ambition to become professional accountants when they were not qualified. But it took 2 years, 1992, 1994, before we could resolve this issue. But that is history. We had actually tried to accommodate these people. We were not selfish. We said, let's have what? 2 tiers of membership. If you have been practicing accountancy for a certain period of time before the law was passed, we said, you will be what? An associate. But to be a full member, you must have gone through the examination processes of a recognized what? Professional accountancy body. But they didn't want that. And we maintained, I don't know whether it has changed now, but there are still, I think, 2 categories. We have associate and we have full members. The actual process, of course, of forming the institute, we were, and I want to thank the Ministry of Finance, we were included as part of the capacity building project, and there was money which was allocated for us to progress the formation of the institute. My firm then, Coopers & Lybrand, volunteered our office to talk about volunteering. We offered all the facilities in the office for the ad hoc committee. Everybody paid their own costs and what have you. We just accommodated them. There was free tea at Coopers & Lybrand, and whenever we met. And eventually, when we got the offices on Bukoto Street, we actually donated the same furniture that we were using in our boardroom to the institute as the first furniture for the boardroom of the council. But a lot of time went in, and I want to appreciate those members of the ad hoc committee. Some proceeded to become members of council. Their pictures are in the program there. Others, for whatever reason, because it became elective, but most of them were elected. I think only one failed to be elected. Don't ask me why. Now, we set out with some objectives at that time, which are consonant with all professions elsewhere. First of all, there was regulation of the accountancy members and the profession. But specific objectives we were aiming, you are asking me, talking about how big we were. We actually dreamed that in 5 years, we should have trained, established an examination board, should have trained and produced 2,500 qualified accountants. We pledged as one of our objectives that we would have standards, accounting standards for Uganda. Eventually, of course, there was no time or need to reinvent what was there already. IFAC, some people used to fear that word, but today I had the CEO himself saying IFAC, so I can use it. They had already prepared international accounting standards. So we said, okay, we are going to what? Look at the standards and see whether we can adopt them as our standards. And that is what we eventually did before IFRS actually came. It was all international accounting standards and international auditing standards. So we adopted the IAS as the Ugandan accounting standards. I think we try to do our own SME standard because there wasn't one in place by then. But again, the IASB came up with a standard for SMEs, so we just added it to the list. We established the account examinations board. The first chairman was my business partner, Mr. Balidawa. I think he's attending or participating online, who did a very, very good job. And I think all of you have come through the system that they started. One great thing is a lot of you are probably 40-something and so on. So you need to know this background. We did a good job with that. What else do I need to tell you? The legal status was there. We had the act. The World Bank assisted us. However, this dispute with the ICSA, we had a very stubborn Auditor General, whom I will not name, who himself was not a qualified accountant. But he decided to take sides with the unqualified people. And he refused to approve the grant disbursement to the Institute on the grounds that we had excluded maybe himself and his friends. John has talked about a shortage of money. We had, I think, $90,000 which had been allocated for strengthening the Institute. We only managed to access, before this dispute became very hot, I think about 25,000, which we used to buy the current building, which now there are many buildings. The original building where the Institute was established. So we actually lost that grant. And we had to start looking around for money. I was very pleased that this morning I handed over the plaque of support to the Deputy Governor, Bank of Uganda. Because of my connections, I also managed to approach them. The first donation, I think, I approached Governor late, may his soul rest in peace, Emmanuel Tumusime, and he gave us, it was not a lot of money, I think 5,000, but that was big money at that time, a donation to the Institute to support our operations. And then we also introduced a development fund. I hope it's still there. We started with something like 300,000 shillings per, was it 300 or 30, per member to support the development of the Institute. The other objective was, of course, to achieve recognition at home here in Uganda, which was made easy because the statute was passed. And then to achieve regional and international recognition. And we also managed to achieve that because we became members of East, Central, and Western African Federation of Accountants called EXAFA. I think it's now PAFA. And then, of course, we were admitted and recognized by IFAC way back. This is all before I retired from office. We also benefited from support of a well-established institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland, in a twinning arrangement, particularly in terms of developing our examinations scheme. I hope we still continue with that brotherly relationship with ICAS. So we were recognized, and we continue, I think, to be recognized since we have joined a bigger African Federation of Accountants in the names of PAFA. If you have any question, ask me.
Thank you.
I am now very old, but not too old. In about 3 weeks' time, I will celebrate my 80th birthday on the 24th of September. I think God has sustained me, but my profession has sustained me as well, and I'm very grateful for that. I invite all of you to celebrate with me